Hello, everyone, and welcome back for episode 4 in this Bible study series. We're going to be moving on from the Scythians for now. We will come back to the Scythians a little bit later when we delve into the scripture, but now we're going to be focusing on a different barbarian tribe, the Gauls. So let's get started. Alrighty, so I wanted to pull this source out from a book from 1840 because it lines up with some other things that I brought out in past episodes. So right here, it talks about the Cimmerians and the Scythians being associated with Gomer, but read what it has to say. Both of whom were historically northern tribes who came from the Caucasus. You know, all the talk about the Caucasus Mountains. But let's keep going though. This suggests that Japheth, who was the son of Japheth, was also viewed as northern invaders from the Caucasus. So they view the Scythians and the Cimmerians as invaders from the Caucasus Mountains. And remember we read in the other source where it talked about that the Scythians and other barbarian tribes liked conquest and plunder and overrunning countries and subduing them that were more rich than their own. So this is nothing but colonizing. So we can go back, and even though this is not talking about color and hair texture, the further you go back before the false doctrine of race was created, we can see who people are based on their behavioral traits. This is colonizing, invaders. Invading the United States, taking it from the Native Americans, Canada, South Africa. I can go on and on. So we're seeing the link here. Okay, we're first going to be getting into a source by Edward Gibbon from the year 1789. Now, I'm actually going to be pulling out a Moorish source as well a little bit later, and I'm going to tie up that source from the Moors with what Edward Gibbon had to say, but we're not going to go to see what the Moors have to say quite yet. We'll save that for a little bit later. Now, let's see what Edward Gibbon had to say about the Gauls. The Gauls derided the hairy and Gantic savages of the north. Their rustic manners, their distant joy, virtuous appetite, and their horrid appearance, equally disgusting to the sight and to the smell. Now, I'd just like to say, I know I definitely butchered some of those words. I apologize for that, but let's break this down. So, for starters, he said that the Gauls were hairy savages of the north. Now, we're going to tie that up with a Japhetic source that I have a little bit later. The savages part, we'll deal with that. And I really want to focus on the hairy as well, because it would be pretty hypocritical for the One West campers to try and say that these people were Negroes, because they like to focus in their Esau's the white man doctrine. They really like to key in on the he was hairy part. So it would really be a contradiction for them to be so hardcore and sold out for the belief that hairy means Caucasian. But when it comes to these tribes in Europe, now hairy doesn't mean white. Now, hairy never did mean white. Elijah the prophet was a hairy man, and he was a man of color. We talked about that in our Masculine Edomite series, but I just really want to mention this because it's very interesting and good information. Now, another thing I want to talk about is their horrid appearance and equally disgusting sight and to smell. And obviously, here at Light Unto the Gentiles, we are about reaching believers all over the world of all different nationalities. This is not, racist or hate towards anybody, but this is painting a specific picture. I mean, even Europeans will tell you that many people in Europe do not have the best hygiene. So the fact that he said that they didn't look good and the fact that they smelled terrible paints a picture in and of itself. And when you have these, like I've mentioned in the past, one Westers trying to take a piece out of the replacement theology pie, and they're trying to say that the Gauls were Negro or whatever. When you start to read the description of the Gauls and them being hairy savages of the north, obviously not everybody, but I'm really pointing this out here. Nothing in this description says Negro. So this is something very interesting. All right, but we have more sources. This is just a behavior thing. Like I've mentioned in the past, you can look into the behavior traits of a people and get a good idea of who they were. Alrighty, we have another source here. This one is from the 1st century BC. Now, this writer gives us a bit more of a detailed description when it comes to what we would call so-called racial features of the Gauls. Let's get into it. The Gauls are tall, with ripping muscles, and white of skin, and their hair is blonde, and not only naturally so, but they also make it their practice by artificial means to increase the distinguishing color which nature has given it. So we have white of skin and blonde hair. And this is the 1st century BC. So now we're starting to get more racial descriptions of what the Gauls looked like. But we can't just go to one source and close the book and say that they were white. We need to keep going. Let's see if we can find more sources. Now we're going to get into some more historical evidence in the department of ancient depictions. Now, the Romans liked to make coins of people who they captured. And one thing I will have to make a video about sometime in the future is it wasn't just Europeans who they liked making coins of the people they captured. They also did it about the Israelites, because there's a famous coin of when the Romans sacked Jerusalem, and they made a coin to celebrate that occasion. And it has the Negro Israelites on the back of the coin celebrating Rome's victory over the children of Israel. So they've been doing this for a long time. So the fact that we can use it for Israelite sources, we can also use it for other nationalities people as well, because Rome was conquering all over the world. They weren't just conquering Negro Israelites. They were conquering heathens and people of different ethnicities as well. Now, this is a coin from 50 BC, and it is of a Gaulish slave woman. So this is a Gaul who has been captured and made a slave by the Romans. And we have multiple of these slave women coins that the Romans made depicting people who they captured. Okay, we're now going to get into DNA once again, just like we did with the Scythians. Now, the Gauls were known to be of the R1b blood type, and as we can see, we can still find that DNA type in different parts of Europe today. And not only that, but the blood matches the migration patterns of these peoples, because we can see that R1b is very high in France. Alrighty, now we're going to be looking at a very old source. This source is from 915 AD. Now, what's special about this source is actually from an Arab dude. So this is a man of color who is saying this. But let's look at what he had to say about the 3 sons of Noah and what their descendants looked like. The children of Shem settled in the center of the earth, which is between Sodom and the sea between Yemen and Syria. Allah made the prophets from them, revealed the books to them, made them beautiful, gave them a black complexion, and free of blemish. So this man says that Shem is black. He didn't say Shem was white, so that's interesting. So this man knows enough truth to understand that Shem was black. Let's keep going. The children of Ham settled in the south. Allah gave them a black complexion and gave some of them a black complexion and blemish free. Now he's talking about the children of Japheth settled toward the north. They are light-skinned, very fair-skinned. So this man, thousands of years ago, made the link between Shemites being black people, Hamites being black people, but it was of his understanding that the light-skinned Caucasian people were of the seed of Japheth. Because he already just told us that Shem and Ham are black. So he already has that right. Here's something that's also very similar. This is from the 8th century, but let's get into this. Noah brought his sons and grandsons, and he blessed them with several settlements, and gave them as the inheritance all the earth. He especially blessed Shem and his sons. Black but comely, he gave them the inhabitable earth. He blessed Ham and his sons, black like a raven, and gave them as inheritance the coast of the sea. And he blessed Japheth and his sons, they entirely white. Again, he's associating Shemites as being melanated people, along with Ham and Japheth being the pale people. Now, these are just some writers from ancient writers. We got other sources that are more deeper than this. This is kind of just, legends that writers wrote, but it's very interesting, especially seeing the Arab dude and what they have to say. Alrighty, now, here's another source. This one stood out to me. I found this in an old newspaper article from 1850, and we're going to be reading a little bit on the top right here. Listen to what it says. The once barbarian descendants of Japheth, receiving from the east the gospel and the civilization. Okay, so this man right here is making the claim that the Japhites were once a barbarian-like group of people, and that they received from the east the gospel and civilization. Now, what is it that, many Israelites, like to talk about with the Moorish stuff? Oh, the Moors brought bathtubs to Europe. And then, the Moors, they brought scripture. White man didn't even know the Bible, before, black people showed up. So let's put that into perspective here. So the barbarian that these people talk about, the Moors civilized, was not Esau. The Moors were not bringing gospel and civilization to Esau. He was bringing it to Japheth. And one thing that I'd like to mention right now is that it makes absolutely no sense on a DNA level, on a biblical level, a historical level, and this common sense level, that the barbarian of Europe would be Esau. Because Japheth was the one who isolated himself from all of humanity for hundreds of years. Esau was neighbors with the Egyptians, so he would have been able to learn technology from them. He was neighbors with the Israelites. He was neighbors with the Moabites. Esau lived in a very populated neighborhood, let's say, and he had friends. So there's no way Esau would become a barbarian because he was a part of a culture of people. We always see in these cartoons and stuff, they make the joke that the people who are isolated from society are the ones who are kind of silly and kind of barbarian-like. Esau was never isolated from humanity. As a matter of fact, he also had, like I mentioned, the Egyptians. He had a lot of good people that he could learn stuff from to strengthen his kingdom. But Japheth, on the other hand, was isolated from humanity for a long time. So seeing this man link the barbarians to being Japheth and not Esau is very interesting. This source lines up with what we just read. Listen to this. Japheth descended to ignorance and perversion of intellectual strength. The tribes of the north were barbarous hordes of Vandals. Rome was a robber empire. Greece was corrupt in the splendor of high civilization. And the masses of mankind had sunken into the gross superstitions of mythology and idolatries.